Hi there, Pete from Craft Cellars here. So I've got another little single malt to tell you guys about. This fun looking product here is the Edradour 12-year-old Caledonia edition. Now, if you're not familiar with this distillery, Edradour is one of the smallest distilleries in Scotland. Up until recently it was known as the smallest. So a tiny little production, but they do some really awesome whiskies. You just don't see them quite as often as some of the bigger brands. I picked this particular one because I think there's a lot of really special characteristics to this that you guys are going to love. But just to give you an idea where the name Caledonia comes from, so it's actually a guy called Dougie Mclean. He's a singer-songwriter from Scotland, and he wrote the famous song Caledonia. So every year they basically pick casks to do these kind of like small batch releases of the Caledonia. So there is a bit of variance year on year. And one thing I noticed with recent batches, in fact this most recent batch in particular, is that the sherry influence in this, as you can see here, has been ramped up pretty significantly. So in terms of maturation, it actually spends the initial part of its life in ex-bourbon. So you know, it's kind of giving it that base level of sweetness, but this sherry cask does a lot of the kind of influencing towards the end of that. It's basically between 3.5 and 5 years that spends in those casks. So, and I should say that's Oloroso. So, bottled at 46%, unchill filtered, no artificial colouring. Let's see what it tastes like. So, immediately you can tell that it is quite sweet leaning. There's big notes of berry, like kind of berry compote, like a kind of stewed, kind of sweet berry. There's definitely a lot of toffee note in there as well, which is more likely coming from the bourbon side. But there's other stuff like dark chocolate and maybe some kind of coffee in there as well. It smells absolutely fantastic. Let's give it a try. So big oils, but big flavour. So there's a lot to get through here actually. There's quite a lot going on in this whiskey, but definitely sweet leaning, like I said earlier. So things like prunes and like kind of jammy notes. There's lots of kind of treacly kind of flavour to it. But again, what I would say about this is all that intense sweetness is more likely coming from the bourbon cask, and then the Oloroso cask is kind of holding it all in place. So as much as Oloroso can impart slightly sweet notes like dark chocolate, things like that, it's also bringing in things like tobacco and definitely a lot of wood spice as well, nutty characteristics too. So like I say, there's quite a lot going on in that. It remains quite bold actually right through the finish. There's maybe more on the spicy sides than there is on the sweet side, but it's still quite big and warming and quite a rich style. That's a gorgeous little whiskey, especially if you like sherried whiskies, then you absolutely want to try this one. But if you like single malt in general, this is definitely one to check out for sure. Cheers.